There's a quiet signal coming out of Minnesota right now. And if you're a Vikings fan paying close attention, it might completely change how you view this entire 2026 draft class. Because while the headlines didn't scream flashy, something much more important is happening beneath the surface. And now, there's real external validation backing it up. The Minnesota Vikings didn't just walk away from the 2026 draft with a handful of hopeful prospects. They walked away with one of the most quietly respected classes in the entire league. And that's not speculation. That's coming directly from Matt Miller over at ESPN, who just released his ranking of the top 100 value picks across the entire draft. And here's where things start to get interesting. The Vikings didn't sneak one or two players onto that list. They landed 5. Let's analyze everything in detail. But first, be sure to click the like button and tell me, are you satisfied with the Vikings' choices? I want to know your opinion. Now, that kind of representation doesn't happen by accident. That's a front office executing a very specific vision. Let's start with the name that might end up defining this entire class. Caleb Tieran. Ranked as the 34th best value pick, despite being selected in the 3rd round, Tieran is already generating serious buzz as a long-term cornerstone. And here's the twist. He's not even expected to start right away. According to Miller, Tieran projects as a future solution at right tackle. That's where things get layered. You've still got Brian O'Neill holding things down at age 30, but with his contract situation looming, the Vikings may already be planning their transition. Tieran's experience, 6 games at right tackle, 38 at left, gives him versatility, but scouts believe his frame is better suited for the right side or even inside at guard. Now think about that for a second. This isn't just depth. This is insurance. This is foresight. And it also subtly increases pressure on Christian Darrisaw, who's coming off a season where injuries, ACL, MCL, clearly limited his ability to perform at full strength. The Vikings are building a scenario where no matter what happens, they're protected at one of the most critical positions on the field. That same philosophy shows up again when you look at their first-round pick, Caleb Banks. Now, let's be honest, this pick divided the fan base. Some saw it as a reach, others questioned the value. But internally, and now externally, there's growing belief this could be the move that defines the entire class. Miller ranked Banks as the 43rd best value pick and described him as the biggest surprise of round 1. Not because he lacks talent, but because of how high his ceiling actually is. Injuries may have clouded his pre-draft process, but when healthy, Banks steps into a Vikings defensive line that was desperately lacking interior dominance. And here's where it connects to defensive coordinator Brian Flores. Flores wants pressure without blitzing. He wants to get home with 4. And the only way that works consistently in the NFL? You dominate from the inside. Pairing Banks with emerging pieces like Jalen Redmond could fundamentally reshape how this defense operates, not just in the future, but as soon as next season. And if Banks reaches anything close to his ceiling, you're talking about potential comparisons to players like DeForest Buckner or Chris Jones in terms of impact. That's not hype. That's the type of upside being discussed. But here's the bigger picture that's starting to form. This wasn't a draft about headlines. It was a draft about identity. The Vikings didn't chase flashy perimeter talent. They didn't go for the easy win in public opinion. They made a calculated decision to get tougher, more physical, and more dominant, closer to the football. And now, with 5 players landing in the top 100 value picks, that strategy is starting to look a lot less risky and a lot more intentional. So here's the question for you, Vikings fans. Are we looking at the foundation of something special here? Or is this still a class that needs to prove it on the field? Drop your take in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started. And this is where the conversation shifts from "this looks promising" to something much more real for the Minnesota Vikings. Because when you stack the rest of this class against what Matt Miller evaluated, you start to see a blueprint, not just individual hits, but a coordinated effort to reshape the roster from the inside out. Take Dominique Orange, for example, ranked 68th on that top 100 value list. This is where things get aggressive from a roster-building standpoint. The Vikings didn't just address the defensive tackle position with Caleb Banks, they doubled down. And that matters, because if there was one consistent weakness on this roster, it was interior defensive line play. That lack of presence forced the defense into uncomfortable situations, having to manufacture pressure instead of naturally creating it. By adding both Banks and Orange, Minnesota is essentially betting that they can fix that issue in one offseason. Miller pointed it out clearly. If both players hit, you're suddenly looking at two starting-caliber defensive tackles on rookie contracts. That's not just depth. That's a massive competitive advantage. And, schematically, it opens everything up for Brian Flores. We saw flashes last season, especially in matchups against teams like Detroit, where the Vikings leaned into heavier fronts. 3 defensive tackles on the field, 5-man lines, controlled chaos at the line of scrimmage. Now imagine that with Banks, Orange, and Jalen Redmond rotating in. That's not just adjustment, that's transformation. And the strategy doesn't stop in the trenches on defense. Because one of the most surprising inclusions on Miller's list might actually say the most about where this offense is headed. Max Bredesen, ranked 83rd in value as a 5th-round fullback. That alone should tell you something. Bredesen isn't just a traditional lead blocker. Coming out of Michigan Wolverines football, he built a reputation as one of the most versatile and reliable blockers in the entire class. Fullback, H-back, hybrid alignment. He did it all. And according to Miller, he had no real peers as a blocker. Now connect that to what the Vikings have historically been on offense. For years, this has been a finesse unit. Perimeter passing, spacing, timing. But rarely, if ever, have they been a team that imposes their will physically in the run game. That might be changing, because Bredesen brings something that's been missing: tone-setting physicality. The kind of player who doesn't just execute blocks, but delivers impact. The kind of presence that can redefine short yardage situations, open up downhill rushing lanes, and bring a different identity to the offense. Even when you compare him to C.J. Ham, who has been a steady presence for years, the difference is in play style at this stage of their careers. Bredesen projects as that downhill force, the guy who meets linebackers head-on and wins those collisions. And if the Vikings are serious about evolving offensively, this is exactly the kind of move that signals it. Now shift to another name that made the list: Deontay Claiborne, coming in at 85th overall in value. This is where things get even more intriguing. Claiborne isn't expected to carry the load early. With veterans like Aaron Jones and the expected involvement of Jordan Mason, his role, at least initially, will be limited. But don't let that fool you. Because what Claiborne brings is something this offense doesn't currently have: explosiveness. We're talking about a back who ran a 4.37 at the Combine, a player with real breakaway speed, a threat to turn a routine touch into a game-changing play. And, maybe most importantly, he's proven he can contribute in the passing game with 51 catches over the past 2 seasons. Now think about that in the context of Kevin O'Connell's system. This is a head coach who understands how to design space, who knows how to create mismatches, especially in the screen game. And suddenly, you give him a weapon like Claiborne, someone who might actually offer more upside in those situations than your traditional backs? That's where this pick could quietly become dangerous. And here's the key takeaway from all of this. The Vikings didn't chase attention in this draft. They didn't go after the names that would dominate headlines or win draft night reactions. They passed on flashier options, and that was intentional. They focused on the trenches, on physicality, on versatility, on building a roster that can sustain success, not just spark it. And now, with 5 players recognized among the top 100 value picks, there's growing evidence that this wasn't just a solid draft. It might have been a smart one. But here's the real question, and this is where you come in. Are the Vikings finally building the kind of team that can compete deep into January? Or is this still a roster that needs one more step before it truly arrives? Drop your thoughts below. And if you're seeing what's starting to form here, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and stay locked in. Because this story is far from over. SKOL.